Welcome back to WGAL's Commitment 2016 election coverage, the debate between the three people running for the Democratic nomination for U.S. Senate. And let's get right to our next question, and it is for you, Mr. Sestak. Non-discrimination bills in several states have gotten a lot of attention recently. Do you support legislation to allow a person to use a bathroom that matches their gender identity as opposed to their assigned gender?
I think that transgenders should be able to use the bathroom that they believe they should go to. My gosh, I went to war with those who in the LGBT community, even though it was don't ask, don't tell at the time, they were there fighting for our nation. Now we knew who they were, they just couldn't tell and we just couldn't admit it. We came home. How can they not have equal rights? I just went down to the Navy Yard with a rabbi who was in the Navy with me. I spoke at his invocation in Montgomery County, and he asked me to go back down there now that he can be out as a proud LGBT member, to be down there to celebrate on Pride Day where the military said LGBT. So yes, they should be able to use it based upon where they believe they should go into it. Look, this is a serious issue because if you go downtown Philadelphia and look at the homeless children, it's about 40% higher on the LGBT community for our youth there because sometimes they're pushed out of the homes, they're not accepted. They go down there and so many more become involved in drugs and other issues in order to just make a go of it. So it is the entire LGBT community. Look, everyone is created equal, whether you're an L, G, B, or T, and you should be able to be out there to go to where you want to go, to take care of what you want to do in eating or public accommodations of any sort, including public accommodations of toilets, etc. I strongly believe that. Man, you go around this world and you see how other countries don't treat their people. We are a beacon of equality, and that's for everyone.
Mr. Sestak, thank you. Mr. Fetterman.
Sure. Of the three candidates here, I believe I have the strongest record of support for the LGBT community. And to answer the question, absolutely they should be able to use the bathroom that they identify with their gender identity. Back in 2013, I was the first state official to officiate a same-sex wedding here in Pennsylvania when it was illegal. Then Governor Corbett threatened that there would be legal sanctions, there'd be penalties, there'd be a price to pay at the polls, and fortunately it didn't work out that way. And I did this because it was the right thing to do, and because we as America deserve better for our LGBT community. I do the right thing when I see a need like that, and I'm proud to say that. And at the end of the day, we in this country must embrace full gender and LGBT equality in this country.
Thank you. Ms. McGinty.
Now, Jerry, I think we're at a critically important juncture in our country's history and story. In the Republican presidential debates we have with Donald Trump, incredibly divisive, discriminatory language that is so contrary to what the history and strength of our country has been. Diversity has been and is our strength, but there are those who would tear us apart. And I think especially now it's critically important to stand up and to embrace the dignity of every single human being. So yes, I do support full access for the LGBT community to the bathroom that the individual identifies with. I think most people on the street today, if you stop them and you said, true or false, is it legal in Pennsylvania today to fire somebody just because of their sexual identity? Most people would say, oh, that can't be true in this day and age. And yet it is. We have to pass non-discrimination legislation. And we certainly have to stop this legislation that is bigotry in thin disguise and make sure that we are standing for the dignity of every single American.
Thank you.
Mr. Fetterman, you live in one of the areas of the state known historically and even now as an energy center in a state. Pennsylvania is one of the leading producers of energy. In the last decade or so, the development of natural gas by fracking has emerged as a significant issue. You have called for a moratorium on fracking. What do you want to know before you would agree to have that moratorium lifted?
Sure. Excellent. Yeah, I called for a moratorium on fracking because I just fundamentally believe that there are two important conditions that need to be met before we would resume fracking. Pennsylvania, as some people may or may not know, is the only state in the country that does not have an extraction tax paid. And I think that needs to change, particularly in a state that's as revenue starved as ours is, and that money could be dedicated and should be dedicated to supporting public education. Two, if we really are the Saudi Arabia of natural gas, as many have described us, we should have the most stringent, really the finest environmental regulations in the country. And I don't see that, and I think we need that. We owe future generations that we're not creating tens of thousands of future love canals here in the state. So those are the two conditions that I would insist upon seeing before I would want to resume fracking in the state.
Ms. McGinty.
Well, Terry, in terms of this whole issue of energy and the environment, it is one that I have dedicated my entire career to. When I was Secretary of Environmental Protection here in Pennsylvania, we went from nowhere on renewable energy to one of the very leaders in the country. By the end of my tenure, we were among the leaders in wind energy jobs and third in the country in solar energy jobs. With respect to any industrial activity, fracking included, we have to have a tough environmental cop on the beat. Regulate it, zone it, tax it. I was proud when I was working with Governor Wolf that we imposed a ban on fracking in our state parks and forests. We immediately took one of the biggest enforcement actions ever against the fracking industry and really cracked down on air, water to ensure that we've got the toughest regulations in place. I'm proud to have the League of Conservation Voters, Environmental Defense Action Fund, others who have recognized me as a champion of the environment taking on these issues, and they're critically important. Absolutely need a tough environmental cop on the beat. Last, I would just say, I'm sick of seeing the Oklahoma and Texas license plates. If this is our energy, it should be our jobs.
Mr. Sestak.
We know I was for a moratorium in 2010 when I ran, and I am for one still today. Because in the military, you learn to expect what you inspect. And when we began fracking here, the EPA was forbidden by a law passed in about 2005 from coming into our Commonwealth and going to see whether the lead that they use in fracking was getting into our drinking water. We don't want another Flint. Look, as we say, piss poor planning gives piss poor results. And so get it right. As the Auditor General said, we weren't ready when we began fracking. DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection, when it began it, didn't have the manpower, the regulations, the oversight to do it. So that's why Range Resources reported 47 violations done in 2011, 12, 13, 14, all supposed to be cleaned up in 90 days. I just want to get it right so that we don't have, like happened in anthracite mining, after it was done, $13 billion of ruined water. And in particularly, they have to remember it was the Navy that developed the sonar for them at millions of dollars for them to be able to even frack. And we developed the diamond bit drill. What do you mean we can't have a return of our investment with an excise tax?
Mr. Fetterman, you want to?
Another troubling aspect of the fracking industry here in Pennsylvania is the so-called Halliburton rule. And that rule was inserted into the legislation that forbid the identification of the chemicals that comprise the fracking fluid. And that's a clear violation of the Clean Water Act. And that is just Washington at its worst. The fact that they inserted a law to make it illegal to disclose that, to know what's going into potentially our drinking water, that's another thing that absolutely needs to change with respects to fracking in the state.
Anybody else? I have a follow-up. Anybody else want to respond to that?
Well, I think that the Halliburton loophole actually even goes further and exempts compliance with Safe Drinking Water Act, Clean Water Act. If you got nothing to hide, you should be willing to comply with the law. As a United States Senator, I would definitely go after closing that loophole. But in the law here in Pennsylvania too, we need to take out something that's called the gag order that's there that doesn't allow physicians who might be concerned about health impacts to speak with other physicians. Look, we need to have that environmental cop on the beat. We need to be protecting public health and the environment. And the public needs to have a seat at the table to be involved in decisions about this industry.
Yeah, to the points my running mates made, I co-sponsored the FRAC Act down there to try to call what John rightly calls the Halliburton loophole, which was what I said the EPA under the Safe Water Drinking Act is forbidden a waiver that the Fracking industry got done not to inspect. But second is, to all point well made, $1 million put into natural gas gives you one job. Because you drill it, you move on. $1 million, as we talk about alternatives, put into a wind turbine with 400 tons of metal gives you 5 jobs. Solar power gives you about 6. That's why we have to go there, because that really is where the job creation, permanent job creation, comes from.
So my follow-up, which I didn't get to ask because Mr. Fetterman jumped in, which is perfectly fine. Look, right now, the price of natural gas is really, really depressed. Severance tax, though it's popular in virtually every poll, would bring in nowhere near what it would have 2 or 3 years ago. So is the future to end fracking, fracking altogether? I mean, is that the goal, to get rid of it altogether? Or is there somehow some way that an accommodation can be made with that aspect of the energy? I'll give you each a few. Go ahead. We'll go down.
I'm sorry, who's going?
No, you go. Go ahead, Mr. Fetterman.
With all due respect, Mr. Madon, I feel like that's sort of a false choice. Energy prices fluctuate. It wasn't that long ago, in fact, in the 2012 presidential election, Newt Gingrich was calling President Obama the $10 a gallon gas president. And now gas, you can actually get less than $2 an hour. Natural gas price is low now. That could change and probably will change in the next 6 months to a year. So in this idea that these companies, if we all three go out and celebrate our debate here and go buy a pizza, we're going to pay tax on that. And middle class families pay tax on all the things that they purchase. So I think it's only fair that if they're going to extract our natural resource, that they also pay a tax.
Well, Tyler, unlike some of the conversation we had before, it's small business. This is ExxonMobil we're talking about. And so even the severance tax that has been debated here in Pennsylvania does not represent a very significant fraction of the kind of profits and profitability that a company like ExxonMobil has. But in terms of the boom and bust that I think you're pointing to, that's why we absolutely have to insist that we're not just going to be the equivalent of a third world country, take our resources and it all gets exported. We need to have the value-added good jobs created in this Commonwealth, and we can be on the cutting edge of advanced, clean, high-tech manufacturing, but only if we step up and say we're going to train Pennsylvanians to have those high-paying jobs, and we're not going to just export a raw resource, we're going to convert it into high-quality, high-value-added products.
If there was ever a time to do it, it's now. And here's why. That the pipes to take out natural gas from Pennsylvania are completely filled. They can't pump any more out. In fact, there's been 70 wells that have been drilled. They're not even fracking them because they can't push any more out. Of the 67 rigs that go around our Commonwealth to drill, only about 19 are even doing anything. So right now is the moment to do it. But also notice, Terry, of the other 14 states that actually have an excise tax, and we're the only one of the 15 with natural gas that doesn't, they haven't taken away their excise tax. So now's the moment to get our return on the investment of the Navy, millions of dollars investing in them to do it, that they couldn't have fracking without, or the diamond bit drill, to say, let's return to our investment, because Range Resources, you didn't clean up the mess you were supposed to, and let's get our regulations right, and then we can see if we can proceed.
Yeah, but we do have an impact fee, which the natural gas companies pay, that doesn't exist in other.
But it's not equivalent at all to what you
Okay.
can get with a 5% excise tax. And as you know, that was kind of a small little pushover kind of thing. And we can still give impact fees, but 5%, that's a big difference in what's the impact fees.
We'll
would
let
be.
each one of you jump in if you want to. Go ahead, Ms.
It
McGinty.
is true. Every objective analysis that has been done of the impact fee shows that it is not even a fraction of what every other state imposes by way of a severance tax. And make no mistake, we pay the severance tax here because these markets are regional and national. And so when Alaska enjoys a severance tax, it's Pennsylvanians paying for it, and it's going into the pocket of Alaskans. It's not right. Pennsylvanians deserve to have their resources justly paid for. And when we see the crisis we have in our budget and schools suffering for resources, it is absolutely not right to jack up people's property taxes while we let ExxonMobil walk away without paying a severance tax.
Are you okay?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a reason why they spend tens of millions of dollars for lobbying over the last several years. I doubt it's because they enjoy the company of our lawmakers so much at lunch.
I got one of the offers. Turn it down.
So they're obviously out for something. They actually expect something in exchange, and of course they don't want to pay a severance tax. So, and I think, as my colleagues have pointed out, that's to the detriment of Pennsylvania, and I think it's unfair, and it's something that we need to bring in line with every other state in the United States where fracking is occurring.
Thank you very much. Next question is from Ms. McGinty. Who a person supports in a presidential campaign says a lot about them, their views, and their politics. Obviously, all three of you are Democrats, but in the Democratic primary, there's a very heated campaign going on right now between former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and Senator Bernie Sanders. Ms. McGinty, who do you support in the presidential campaign and why?
Well, first of all, I have to say I am proud of both of our Democratic frontrunners. And as compared to what we've seen on the Republican side of the aisle, the discussion, the debate has been about ideas, it's been about issues and values. I have supported and endorsed Hillary Clinton because I had the honor of working with her when I was in the White House with President Clinton. And I was driving forward initiatives like environmental justice and the impact on children of various kinds of environmental pollution. And she was always supportive and helpful along those lines. But the issues that the Democrats are raising, this historic loss of value and economic standing of working families and the middle class, is the vital issue of our country right now. You know, I have sat down with hardworking women and men working 2, working 3 jobs, but they can barely pay the bills, and most of them feel themselves falling further and further behind. I've sat down with families struggling in terms of college tuition debts. Now, not just the student, but the parents who have taken out the Parents Plus loans, and the grandparents struggling then to help out as well. You know, we have in Senator Pat Toomey somebody who has voted against raising people's wages, somebody who has voted against middle-class tax cuts to support and afford college, has voted against enabling people to refinance their student loans, and is voting to take away people's Social Security. Look, the Democratic frontrunners are fighting for hardworking families, and I'm really proud of the kind of dialogue, issues, ideas they're putting on the table.
Thank you. Mr. Sestak, as I lose my paper, who do you support?
As I mentioned earlier, when you asked about endorsements, I've neither asked for nor have I given an endorsement. Because frankly, when I ran against Senator Specter and the whole world endorsed him, I found it didn't really matter because people weren't trusting anymore. 42% of the families in the largest city in Pennsylvania live in poverty. They're not asking who I endorse or who someone else endorsed. They want to know what I would do. But I do respect the 2 candidates who are running. Having worked in the White House closely with Secretary Clinton, she helped me get Agent Orange more covered for our vets, actually. As even First Lady, I think she would be a very fine Commander-in-Chief. Bernie Sanders, I thank for raising the scourge of our society, income inequality. But if you only fix that and look at it that way, then that means redistribution of wealth and some benefits. That's taking care of the fever, not the source of it. I believe in economic mobility. That's why I did those events all the way across Pennsylvania as I walked. Small businesses we talked about, get them going again, relieve the regulation to get demand for labor. Education, our homeland defense, let's get it. And fair pay for women, which isn't happening. And the biggest source of discrimination we have today, pregnancy discrimination. So that's what gives us economic mobility. But endorsements.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Fetterman, who do you support in the presidential race?
I'm proud to say that I'm the only candidate in this race that has endorsed Bernie Sanders for president. And I chose Bernie Sanders to endorse for the very same reason that I was the only elected official in Western Pennsylvania to endorse Barack Obama in 2008 when he was running for president. Because I believed then that Senator Obama was the right candidate for the job, and he's where the party is going. And in 2016, I believe Bernie Sanders is where the party is and where the party is going. And to most respectfully disagree with my colleague, Mr. Sestak, inequality is more than just one issue. It is the signature issue of our day. And if anyone thinks that inequality is just one issue, I don't believe that they fully understand the scourge of inequality, because it pervades everything. Education, healthcare, housing, health, you name it. It's not just one issue, and that's why I am proud to say that I've endorsed Bernie Sanders for president.
He wants to follow up.
And Mr. Sestak, you were mentioned by name there. Go ahead and respond.
Someone I do respect. He actually said what I said, income inequality is a scourge, but if you look at it only as redistribution of wealth, as only more benefits, you don't fix it permanently. Much, John, like you said, and I said, small businesses got to be having, education's got to be done. So I think we're on the same sheet of music here. I'm probably a little more off tune. But that is where what we have to do is economic mobility, give away a fair opportunity to be all they might be.
We're going to stay with you, Mr. Sestak. I think without doubt one of the more important roles for United States senators is to advise and consent on judicial nominations, federal judicial nominations. Before the Senate now is President Obama's nomination of Merrick Garland to the Supreme Court. Coming up in the next 6 years, obviously the term for the new senator from this state, you would have what? A possibility of 2 or 3 additional nominations to the court. And so here's my question. Would you have a litmus test to your vote to consent to a presidential nominee? If so, what would the ingredients involve?
First off, it's egregious how Pat Toomey and everyone else won't even let the constitutional duty of the president and themselves be conducted to have them come forward for a vote. That said, I also believe that the second most important vote a senator makes, besides the decision to go to war, is who they're going to vote for the Supreme Court. Because the Supreme Court, the judicial branch, shapes the character of America probably more than any other branch. Roe versus Wade, Brown versus Board of Education, Gore versus Bush, a presidential election, Affordable Care Act goes there. And so therefore, I want to make sure that that nominee who comes before him understands the 2 great tenets that sit under our soul. Rugged individualism, let those individuals be all they can be, but we're all in this together with the Affordable Care Act, for example. So as I look at a nominee coming forward, I want to make sure that they do understand the issue that you raised, sir, Jerry, that LGBT, the entire community, is equal to everyone else. I want to make sure the issue I raised up, that government does have a role to play for the people of paycheck fairness. I want to make sure that choice is well defended for our women, that it is their choice. And going through those are not litmus tests by issues. What they are is understanding that we do want a government that doesn't unduly interfere with our freedom, but one that is joined together in the commonwealth, the common good, where the government of the people can actually come together on it. And those 3 examples are some of the ones that I would insist that we would have somebody on the Supreme Court to best defend the character of America.
Okay. Ms. McGinty.
Well, Terry, I think this whole episode just shows how privileged a class Washington has become, so out of touch with the reality of hardworking people. You know, I know my own dear dad, who walked the beat for 35 years as a policeman, or my mother who went to work every night as a hostess in a restaurant. If either of them would have just refused to do their job for what's going to amount to a year, they would have been out of that job. There are not a whole lot of things that the Constitution lays out that senators have to do. This is one. It's clear. Senators need to advise and consent when the president makes a nomination. You know, Senator Toomey needs to do his job or, frankly, step aside. And this is vital. Every issue that is before the Supreme Court is one that vastly and extensively impacts Americans in every aspect of their life.
Thank you. Mr. Fetterman.
Yes, I'm actually proud to say that I do have several litmus tests. And really those litmus tests really comprise what I believe are some of the core bedrock principles that we as Democrats embrace. First of which, do you support the repeal of Citizens United? I believe money in politics is a cancer. Citizens United needs to be repealed. 2, to protect a woman's right to choose. That right was enshrined by the Supreme Court, but is now under siege in many states across this country, particularly states like Texas. That would be another thing that I would absolutely insist upon. 3, do you believe in the general consensus, the scientific consensus of climate change? We can't have somebody on the Supreme Court that just trusts their gut because it snowed last week that we don't have an issue with climate. 4, do you support the equal rights for the LGBT and transgendered community? We have to enumerate their rights and include those in the basic civil right legislation. And finally, a union's right to organize. And those are my 5 litmus tests, if you will, for anyone that I would vote for Supreme Court.
Thank you very much. All right, we are just about done here, so we are going to have closing statements. And in fact, due to the time, each of you will have 30 seconds for your closing statements. We want to make sure everybody gets in, and we'll start with you, Mr. Sestak.
There is one endorsement I would like to have, and that's of the people. I served this nation in the Navy. I served it as a congressman after my daughter got brain cancer for universal health care for all, keeping our office open 7 days a week. And then I turned down those lobbying jobs and went to teach. I want to bring integrity of service back to public officials. I don't want to just win. I would like to govern, and you can't do it without the trust of the people. More than anything else, that's why I'm running. I very much want to make sure we restore the American dream in housing and education, but you can't do it without the trust of people. I ask for your endorsement.
Thank you. Ms. McGinty.
Thank you. We're at a critical point in our country's history and in the experience of every family in this Commonwealth and country. If you're working hard out there, your paycheck should show it. You have earned Social Security. It needs to be there for you in your retirement. Our families need affordable health care. These are some of the basics. You know, America has always celebrated hard work. I come from a hardworking family. There's nothing I value more than investing in young people and standing by our families. I'm Katie McGinty, and I'm asking for your support because it's time,
Ms.
it's
McGinty.
your turn for the middle class to get ahead.
Thank you very much. Mr. Fetterman.
Most important order of business, I want to wish my mother a happy 67th birthday. She's out there watching. 2, I'm here to ask for your support. I've been the mayor of a community in Western Pennsylvania that was really left for dead. And for the last 11 years, we've been building that community back up. And I fundamentally believe the successes and the lessons that we've learned in that fight are applicable all across Pennsylvania for all of Pennsylvania's communities. And I'm running for the United States Senate to be a champion for these communities all across Pennsylvania, the way I've been a champion for Braddock. And I'm honored to have your support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great debate tonight. In fact, we've used every last second. That does it for us. Thank you so much for watching it. Dr. Madonna, thank you. Have a great night.